Hey everyone, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited because we are here today with Dr. Robert Melillo. And by the way, did I pronounce that correctly? Because I didn't ask you about that ahead of
No,
time.
you did actually. It's very good. Not many people don't right off the bat. So good for you.
Oh, that's fabulous. That's fabulous. So, I'm really excited today. We're going to be talking about learning disabilities. We're going to be talking about left brain overactiveness and left brain issues and challenges that you might have that cause learning disabilities. And so we're going to talk about the fact that you can actually overcome that. And Dr. Robert Melillo is so perfect at really helping you realize that there's actual causation here that we can overcome. And it's so wonderful to be able to talk with somebody that's been in this industry for such a long time. He's been doing this for over 30 years, helping families overcome lots of different areas. We're actually only going to talk about left brain issues today because we're going to talk about right brain issues in 2 weeks in the first week of December here. So make sure you check back because if you are dealing with stuff like ADHD and autism and things like that, then that's the right brain. So we're going to talk about that in another episode. But right now we're talking about left brain learning disabilities. And seriously, I am so excited to chat with Dr. Robert Melillo because he is so really practical. And I love that. And it's really, when you just watch him in action, there's so much hope and possibility there. And that's what I love about him. So, I just would love you to introduce yourself. First of all, thank you for being here today and sharing with our audience of fabulous homeschoolers. And so I want you to just introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about you and why this is such an important topic for you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, for me, I think as for all of us that are here, the reason why it's so important is because we're parents, and because that is the number one job in the world, being able to help our children and help them become, really independent, amazing adults. And I had three. I'm a father of three, and all three of my kids had different issues. Two of them had left brain delays, like what we're going to talk about today. So I am Dr. Robert Melillo. I am a clinician. I've been in practice for over 30 years. I'm a researcher. I have over 100 scientific publications as well as textbooks. I also have 8 best-selling books, including Disconnected Kids, which just came out with our 3rd edition that's been translated into 18 languages around the world. And I also, am a professor. I have a research lab. I have multiple degrees. I started out my life as a chiropractor, where I had also gotten a diplomate in neurology and then rehabilitation. I then got a master's degree in clinical rehabilitation neuropsychology, and I have a PhD in developmental cognitive neuroscience from Haifa University. And so, I've been a lifelong student. I've been a lifelong educator, a researcher, a clinician. But of those, my most important job is being a father. And I have so much love and respect for parents and whatever we can do to help them. And that, for me, is really what it's about. And I can't imagine a more important job that I could be doing with my life.
I agree 100%. We are on the same page with that. And I love that you're a lifelong learner because we talk about that a lot around here and developing lifelong learners in our kids, but we also have to exemplify that in ourselves. And so such a beautiful thing. And I'm sure that that comes across in everything that you do when you work with families, which is super, super amazing. So when you talk about left brain, can you just share with us a little bit about what's that whole left brain issue thing? Like, what does the left brain actually do?
Yeah. So the left brain is really, when we look at classic, what we look at as IQ, right? When we talk about academics, the left brain, the way it works from a neuroscience perspective, is the left brain actually develops the second, third year. So the first 3 years, the right brain takes the lead in development. And then for the next 3 years, the left brain takes the lead in development. And this is what creates the right and left brain abilities and skills. And that gives us an incredible advantage. As humans, we have the most difference between our hemispheres. And we know that brains have been asymmetric since the beginning of time, essentially, meaning that we wrote a paper last year looking at the research that shows that, looking at fossil record, we could see that the earliest living things 500 million years ago had an asymmetry of their brain, So this has been around for a long time. And as you go more and more up the intellect scale, as far as with animals and animal kingdom, the more asymmetric the brain is, the smarter the animal is. And obviously we have the most. So the left brain is really, when the left brain comes online, we start forming conscious memories. Most of us don't form conscious memories before the age of 3. That's called childhood amnesia. And that's because the right brain is more subconscious or unconscious. The left brain is now about really also collecting data, right? Learning facts, forming memory about facts and details. And so the left brain is really good with taking in data, storing it. It then kind of lines it up sequentially. So it lines it up and we have more of a time frame of like past, present, future. And we use a lot of this information to predict into the future what's going to happen to guide our behavior. And the left brain, because it has this sequential nature to it, naturally kind of things like math, operations, calculations we're good at. The left brain also controls verbal language. So being able to sequence small muscles rapidly, as in speech, and organize sounds and letters. The left brain is more abstract. So it takes symbols, like a word for the tree is more of a virtual abstract tree. It's not a real tree. The left brain kind of lives more in a virtual world. It's more mechanistic. The left brain is more motor driven. So it has a tendency to be more hyperactive. If we have overactivity of the left, we can see things like tics and hyperactivity. But the left brain is about motor planning and organizing our movements. The left brain is more fine motor type of movements. The left brain sees things very clearly. It looks at detail. It looks at the small picture. And it looks, again, very more slowly at things that one step at a time. And it looks for patterns and tries to predict that pattern. The left brain likes familiarity. It likes to do the same thing over and over. The left brain is more motivated. So it's motivated because it's more goal directed. So the left brain sets goals. And then the left brain generates the motivation to pursue those goals and to be able to believe that we can achieve that goal. And then to do it repetitively to make it into a habit. And then it's about promoting habit formation. And so the left brain also is generating more positive emotions like joy and happiness, pride, but also anger. And anger is really a positive emotion because it really keeps us persistent, right? Anger is there basically because if we're going after a goal and something gets in our way, we need to be able to get kind of pissed off and move through it, right? So that we don't give up. So not giving up and sticking with something, and getting pride over that is really more, again, a left brain thing. And the left brain also activates the immune system and what we call the sympathetic fight or flight system. So the left brain is activated when we're going to fight off an infection or, if we're creating antibodies. And if it's overactive, we can get too much inflammation. If it's weak or delayed, we can get chronic infections, chronic ear infections, strep throats that don't go away. We can get sick that way. So all of that comes together. And the left brain is really more about, gathering data, collecting data, using that data as a tool to get towards a goal, and then kind of doing that and predicting with it. And so, if we have a delay in the left brain, the traditional way we learn academics is hard. It's hard to read. It's hard to do basic math. It's hard to form memories. We get kids that parents will say, we went through the times table and I know they knew it. And then the next morning they woke up and it was like it just fell out of their head. They just can't hold on to that factual memory in that way. So, but the right brain is really more wisdom. And when we see delays on the left side, we might also get overactivity of the right. And the right brain is more the emotional intelligence, but we may see emotionally reactive children where they're overly emotionally reactive. They're too sensitive. If they don't have strong left brain, they can have low pride and not really feel as much joy and have more shame and guilt and sadness, which is generated more from the right brain, a sense of fear and danger. And this can lead to a lot of anxiety and social anxiety, especially to a child that might be struggling in school.
Oh my gosh, it's so fascinating. You guys, I can totally geek out on this stuff. It's absolutely fabulous. I never even realized about the 0 to 3 year old amnesia thing and how the brains balance out like that. That's so amazing. And I love the way that you talked about really that one is lower. So if the left brain is lower delayed, as you said, then the right brain is higher. Then we see these commonalities of symptoms. And I've heard that so many times from parents that, yeah, this, we just went over our, they can't remember statistics and things like that, or they can't remember, like factual information from when we just said it yesterday. And that's so common. And so it's something I didn't know was how common it actually is. Like dyslexia is, I just learned this like last year that it's what, 1 in 5, is it, people?
Yeah, it's the most common, probably single issue. Certainly, it's the most common learning disability. About 85% of learning disabilities is probably, fits into the dyslexia category. But yeah, so, it's about 20% of the population, 20% of the population. So about 1 in 5. And, it's probably the single biggest issue of everything, even bigger than ADHD or, yeah.
That's so fascinating. I absolutely love that we're getting this information out there because it's something that we often feel like, oh my, I know, there's things that are like my kid's reading, but then maybe the spelling or maybe the writing, and that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting. And when you think about, is that is that something we should be looking for as parents when they're really young, just like constantly just trying to figure out what that looks like ahead of time so we don't have problems? Or do we just look for symptoms as they come up?
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, let's define what dyslexia is, right? Because most
Yeah.
people don't really know what the actual definition is. Most people think it's reversing letters or transposing words. That's not the definition of dyslexia. Dyslexia is a word reading problem. So basically, in a child that's perfectly healthy, normal to above average intellect, and is raised, in a good environment, that if they have how to read words and basically phonemic awareness or like phonics, that is dyslexia, right? And for me, if a child in word reading is, anywhere from a year and a half to 2 years below where they should be, that is dyslexia. Now,
Okay.
what's important to know about that is that a school will never use that term. Most
No, it's crazy.
will never say your child is dyslexic, even though it's a neuropsychology term and we use it in research. They don't use it in the schools because that term isn't really in the DSM. So the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, it may be called a reading disorder or a phonological disorder, or a learning disability, but they don't use the term dyslexia. And most people don't really know what that term means. And it is, the definition also is that it's a neurological disorder. So it is a problem with the brain, and it is not, a behavioral problem, and it's not, a personality flaw, even though it's superimposed on a certain type of personality. And so, right from the beginning, if a child is going to have any sort of delay, the way that you can look for that is looking at their milestones, meaning early on, looking at their motor milestones, looking at how they develop, and looking at their language milestones and their nonverbal communication milestones, pointing, eye contact, those types of things. And so that's really what should cue you in. And if they're off of those milestones right off the bat, you have to look and say, okay, there's an issue and there's an imbalance developing, but where is it? Is it going to be autism or ADHD, or is it going to be dyslexia and a learning disability? Because neurologically, those things are opposite for the most part.
So when we're talking about, I know we're talking a lot about dyslexia. Are there other learning disabilities that we should be aware of that are left-brained?
Yeah, there's dyscalculia, which is really dyslexia for math and numbers, where they have trouble, again, remembering math facts or recognizing math symbols or, getting them mixed up. And then there's, processing issues like auditory processing, visual processing, And again, all of these aren't really just deficits, they're imbalances. The left brain does more what we call local processing. The right brain does global processing of auditory and visual information. So that, people that are left brain deficit, right brain dominant are really good at getting the big picture, like instantly. But they struggle with, really focusing on details. And there's only one type of attention that is really left brain, and that's really highly focused, super hyper focused attention. Like when we really have to concentrate on something and really, study for something and really concentrate, that's left brain. And that if someone has that problem, that may be labeled as ADHD type 1. But that's not the classic ADHD, which is really more of a right brain, which has to do with a more open kind of sustained attention rather than a very narrow focus. And so the analogy of understanding, again, why do we have two areas of the brain and two areas of attention? And why would that be beneficial? Why don't we just have one area that does attention, right? So Ian McGilchrist, a very famous psychiatrist out of the UK, has written a number of books on brain asymmetry and its relationship to psychology and philosophy. And he used a lot of the same references that are in my book. But he comes up with an analogy where he says, imagine a bird and they need to look on the ground for a seed amongst pebbles, right? And they need to be able to pick out which is the seed, which is the pebble. Takes really fine, focused attention to be able to do that. But at the same time, you need to have a broad, open focus to look for a predator that might come and kill you, right? So, and you need both of them at the same time. You can't do one and then the other because it won't work that way. So having one center for attention is not going to work. You have to have literally two, and you need two sides of the brain to do that. And that's true with everything. Verbal communication with the left, nonverbal with the right. Both of them have to be working at the same time to have really ideal communication. The whole brain is working, but the two sides of the brain do very different things at the same time.
That's so fascinating. And that makes so much sense. And thinking about, what the causations are, and maybe we don't know. I know you do a lot of research. So what do we know any causations about why one's imbalanced versus the other?
Sure. I've written my third book is more about causation. It's called Autism, the Scientific Truth. But essentially, for the most part, in any of this, there is no genetic mutation per se, right? But it is superimposed on personality traits. And what we see is that kids or adults that end up with imbalances, it starts out where they have areas of their brain where they're gifted more. They tend to be, a little bit stronger. When we talk about someone being gifted or talented or intelligent, what does that mean? I translate everything into neuroscience, right? And basically it means that there are areas of the brain that do a different function. Like there's areas of the brain that are responsible for musical talent or for athletic ability or for, math ability or for reading or for imagination or for, getting along with other people. And we have these areas that regulate that function. And in people that are gifted or talented, that area of the brain, they're just born with, there's more connections. It's more tightly connected in that area, and they can do it better. But when there's really strength on one side, it tends to create a little vulnerability where you're not so good on the opposite skill, right? Because that's the way it kind of works. And most people, if they're gifted in something, their strengths outweigh their weaknesses. We all have strengths and weaknesses, but when there's more apart they are, the more you see more gifts, but you also see the vulnerability for more weakness. And if you start out with a weakness that's pretty strong and you haven't developed the gift yet, then you may get somebody who ends up with a disability that never really fully taps into that gift, even though it's there and we can bring it out, and the disability outweighs the strength. And that is really what starts it. So people with left brain delays, we tend to see the personality traits tend to be more right brain dominant. And there are different personality traits that I've identified. So you get people that could be very athletic or kinesthetic in movement and dance, You get other people that are creative from a design or architecture type perspective. You can get people that are classically, artists, the creative type, painters, sculptors. You can get
Yeah.
people that have great ideas like Thomas Edison, who was dyslexic. You can get musical talent. My daughter is, dyslexic, but she started writing songs, with words and music when she was 9. And, she's an incredible savant with that. Zach Brown, who produced her album and she opened for, he's dyslexic. He and I wrote a book together. And so Ed Sheeran is dyslexic. They say 50% of people that work at NASA are dyslexic because they have unusual visual spatial skills,
Right.
which is the right brain. We also can get people that are just incredibly social or just really good at reading other people and very empathetic, although that can be too much where they overread people and feel like people are judging them all the time. And that can really damage their self-esteem and leads to a lot of social anxiety, because the right brain is driven by human attachment and it loves nature and it's very altruistic and it wants to be around other people and it wants people to love us, because the key to survival for humans is we must be part of a group. And so there's something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is an overactive right that we see in dyslexic people or people that might have ADHD 1, where they have such a fear of rejection that it's overwhelming. And especially social media now, it's driving that. I worked with one little girl who was 12 who tried to commit suicide when her parents took her phone away from her. It was crazy. She was so fear of being rejected by her peer group.
Wow. Wow. That makes me I am super fascinated by that. And especially it makes me think of like Beethoven or something, is really, gifted in one area, or Elon Musk, right? It's like, but he's got Asperger's, right? Too. So it's really interesting. I absolutely love that. And thinking about our kids who have these gifts, and tapping into those gifts, I would think is important to really give them a sense of, accomplishment or something like that. But then we can also, balance out the inconsistencies on the other side. So what do we have to do? Like, what are some things that we can do with our kids that have a left brain, imbalance?
Yeah. So first of all, you have to physically, literally change the brain, right?
Okay.
You can't just handle this behaviorally. You can only compensate so much.
Right.
And like you said, typically the behavioral approach has always been, well, let's focus on their strengths and ignore their weaknesses so we don't make them feel bad. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that actually makes the imbalance worse.
Okay.
And let's make this really clear. I don't care what anybody says. You can completely get rid of dyslexia. We have done it thousands and thousands of times every year, because there is no reason why you can't. The idea that it has to be a lifelong disability is completely wrong. Okay. So it can be changed. And that's what I think every parent would want for their child.
Absolutely.
Because they are gifted and they don't have to have this deficit. And we can build that up so that everything is a strength and that everything is easy. I mean, we have kids and we do academic testing on every child that can do it. And we have kids that are sometimes, 3, 4, 5, 6 grade levels, 10 grade levels below in reading. And then within a year, we can get them sometimes 4 or 5 grade levels above their grade level in reading, right?
That's awesome.
So, and this happens every time if they do the program right. So we need to literally grow the brain on the left side and actually quiet the right side down, because once one side of the brain becomes too dominant, it holds the other side back.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things that contributes to this imbalance. The imbalance is the actual disability. And it's all explained by understanding this right and left brain type of imbalance. So what we need to do is literally physically stimulate growth, and by activating different areas of the brain. We need to work basically on foundational motor skills. Like if they have these things called retained primitive reflexes, we need to get rid of them because that's blocking the brain from growing, and it is the foundation of this imbalance. We need to then target the left brain by doing specific types of stimuli, like certain frequencies of sound, certain frequencies of light, stimulating the right side of the body, stimulating the right ear or the right eye more, and actually, having things go to the left side of the brain. Fine motor skill is more of a right brain skill than gross motor skill. Working on timing and rhythm and coordination is also very important. Eye movements and vestibular, stimulating the inner ear, doing particular eye movements, working on balance. But then also working on cognitive skills, literally working on basic word reading and phonics, and working on auditory processing by using sound as a stimulus, working on visual processing by doing light and eye movements as an actual stimulus, working on touch processing by doing vibration or tactile. And then we have different tools that we use that can activate one side of the brain and slow down the other. Things like transcranial direct or alternating current. We can use photobiomodulation or lasers to activate different areas of the brain and inhibit others, and speed up one side and slow down the other. We can use things like neurofeedback. We also, the diet and nutrition can also be an important factor of this. And we have, I created a left brain vitamin that provides the amino acids for the neurotransmitters for the left brain, which is dopamine and acetylcholine, as well as different cognitive enhancing supplements like huperzine that enhance memory, choline. So it's a combination of everything. Again, if they go through my book, Disconnected Kids, we do tailor it towards the individual person. But then we work on, on word reading. We work on basic math operations and work on those particular skills.
That's fascinating. I absolutely love that. There's so many things you can do. Do you guys know that there's so many things you can do that Dr. Melillo just talked about? And I love that it's so it's very practical. And I want to say it sounds very overwhelming because there's so many things, but it's also there's a step-by-step process in that way. And it's hopeful because we can actually help our kids do that. And I know as you were talking, I was thinking about my son and how he tends to be more, it tends to be a little left brain delayed, but he reads really well. But having him in his martial arts where he's doing coordinated movements has really been helpful for him a lot in speeding up the process of just in academics as well. So it's really fascinating. And I didn't really make that connection until just now. I was thinking about him separately. So it's super fascinating. In thinking about how we do all of these things. So I did link your book in all the show notes and in your website for sure in our comments below the Facebook group. So you'll be able to see all of that stuff for Dr. Melillo. But how do we really get in touch with you? And how do you help families? Like, what do you do with families to work with them?
Well, the way to get in touch with me is through my website, drrobertmelillo.com. And there's a part on our website that says, do you want to work with us? So if you want to make an appointment, we do virtual consults, and we even can develop virtual programs. But primarily, I have two offices in New York, one on Long Island, one we just opened in New York City. And we work with patients every day on this, and from all over the world, literally. So, people come in here and, they come and stay in New York for anywhere from a week to a year, depending on what they want to work on and what's going on. We work with all age groups. So all of it is developmental neuroscience to me, right? So
yeah,
we know that almost all of adult mental health issues really start in childhood. And it starts in the first 6 years, and it's all about this imbalance. And so we work with adults, we work with kids. Many times we work with the parents who are really like their children and have similar issues, and we may work with them together. And then we develop home programs, and we send them back home eventually with a home program. We monitor that from a distance. They come back and we reevaluate them. And most of our programs, last around a year. And usually in that period of time, when you're talking about learning disabilities or dyslexia, if there's no other issues like an actual brain injury or a real genetic issue, we can usually resolve it within that year. I mean, permanently.
That's amazing. I absolutely love that. And you know what I love about it too is that so many parents are homeschooling because their kids aren't getting what they need out of public school. So they're not getting you and I have talked about that before. The special needs programs, the special ed programs are absolutely ridiculous. And they don't, not only do they not really recognize dyslexia, but they don't know how to do anything. They don't know have any accommodations for it or how
No,
to deal with that and help children.
no,
So one of my clients, she even had her kid go to both of her sons go to a dyslexia school, and still they were having trouble. So it's something where we really have to approach that on a neuroscience level. I love that you're doing that. And it's so practical, I think, in terms of doing little steps at a time and really working on creating those balance happening. So I absolutely love this. Thank you so much for joining us today. Know that we're going to get back together in a couple weeks and we're going to be talking about the right brain. So we're going to be talking about the right side, which right side, can you just share with us what are some of the issues? Like, just so you've talked about ADHD, but what are some of the more common ones there?
deficits on the right, overactivity on the left is what we see in autism spectrum,
Okay.
OCD, tics, Tourette's, ADHD, type 2 and type 3, schizophrenia, psychosis, mania, some aspects of anxiety, all of those types of issues, anger management issues, things like that.
That's beautiful. I love that. So we're going to cover all the brain in the next couple of weeks. It's super exciting. I want you guys to make sure that you check out all the contact information. Check out Dr. Melillo's website and make sure that you get his book, at least get the Disconnected Kids book, because that's really going to give you a foundation for everything that he's talking about today. And thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you again next week. Bye-bye.